Hello everybody, today I'm going to solve blindfold, so 3 positions, 10 minutes per each. Let's go! First of all, we need to realize what's going on. This is a position with isolated d for pawn, so potentially any endgame is bad for white. If black's pawn were on g7, it would be really bad for white. I mean, black would be clearly better. While with pawn on f6, it's actually not that bad for black, since the pawn on f6 is controlling the e5 square, so like knight e5 is never an option. But black's king is exposed, and this is something what white can use, or at least like try to use. Now let's go step by step. And first step is prophylaxis. So rook a c8. Black is not threatening anything. Rook c1. Rook takes c1 is not a big deal. Then just rook takes c1. And if it was black, I mean, it's possible to take on c1, then rook c1, then maybe, for example, rook c8. But I think rook a c8 was mainly about just like developing the rook and preventing rook c7. So forcing moves for white. Second step, forcing moves. Rook takes c8. There are no checks. Queen g5 is the only check, but it's pretty bad, losing your queen. Captures queen e6. It's bad. Rook c8, it is something we can, like, yes, something to keep in mind, but probably not like nothing special about rook takes c8. And there are no other captures. Okay. Our third step is piece improvement. So what pieces can be improved? And since we are already in improvement stage, not development stage. So development stage is something like when you can still develop one of your pieces. All white's pieces are developed, so there is not much to do about that. Yes, there is absolutely nothing to do about that. So, and since we are talking about improvement, it means that we should start with our most powerful piece, which is a queen. So queen on e3, and two options. If we talk about the queen, two options are queen f4 and queen h6. Thus, by the way, if I skipped that in forcing moves, but checks, captures, and third category is threats or attacking moves. And actually queen f4, queen h6, it's all about that, attacking moves. So if we talk about improvement, then queen f4, queen h6, we can't really do much about the knight on f3. It's about like knight h4 is the only possible move, since otherwise queen take g2, checkmate. Okay. So how about... Yes, also if we talk about improvement or kind of improvement, I have an idea about playing rook c4. And the point is that after, if black takes on c4, rook takes c4, b takes c4, queen takes c4, probably not a good idea. But let's just check it. Queen c4, and there is knight e5. Very interesting. So if f takes e5, there is queen g5 check and taking the rook on d8. But after knight e5, there is queen d5, queen g3 check, king f8, and there is no follow-up. And another problem that actually after rook, even after rook c4, black is not obliged to take on c4. Black is not obliged to take like second time on c4, but rook c4 is just something to keep in mind. Yes, at the moment I'm leaning to queen f4 or queen h6, but if we had no option to improve something, then like maybe h3, for example, just a kind of useful move. But probably after h3, like I mean next move, I think black wants to play something like queen f5, for example, queen f5 or queen h5. This is this is a bit annoying. Maybe then bishop d5 or threatening to take on f3, so something like that. So let's think. Queen f4 or queen h6, those moves are possible. If queen f4, then okay, black can play king g7. Even king g7 is enough. Yeah, queen g3 check, then king h8, and we can go for queen f4. After queen f4, it's also possible to play queen f5. Then, for example, queen takes f5, e takes f5, and maybe knight h4 or something like that. Yes, so it's not bad. While if we talk about queen h6, probably queen f5. Don't see anything interesting there. Like knight h4, there is just queen g5, and black is perfectly fine. So yes, at the moment, if we talk about queen f4, queen h6, queen f4 seems to be more interesting. And if I had to answer right now, then I would say queen f4. But let's just make a final check. Maybe there is something more interesting, but actually what can it be? Yes, since anyway knight e5 anyway not possible because of queen takes g2. Knight h4, then just queen g5. What else? And rook c4 might be interesting. Rook c4. But also doesn't give much. Okay, so my move is queen f4. So the position is very complicated. Black's king on b7 is exposed. Black is a pawn up. Black has the bishop pair, and it's all good in the long run. The question if black will be able to to hold till the end game. And let's go move by move. So first of all, if white is threatening anything, and knight b5 comes to mind. Knight b5, rook takes c7, knight takes a7, bishop takes a7. Yeah, maybe queen c4 can be a good idea for white. Rook hd1 I don't think, doesn't make sense. So first of all, prophylaxis. I mean, prophylaxis was about checking white's options. Yes, there is nothing forcing right now. There are no checks by white. So if we talk about like forcing moves, then actually step one is checking, like step one is prophylaxis. So you look for the opponent's forcing moves, and step two, forcing moves, you look for your forcing moves. Okay, our forcing moves, what black can do. And queen e3, queen takes e3, giving up the queen, not really great. Queen takes f4 also doesn't make sense. So we start with checks, captures. Knight takes g4, but then just f takes g4, no sense. Knight e4, also nothing interesting. White takes it. Queen f4, queen e3, queen c3, doesn't give anything. Threats or attacking moves like rook d2, but yes, white just takes it. You see, those positions, like, they are mainly not tactical, but it's still about, like, it's like a really good skill. Really something you need to do is to check all those stupid moves or crazy moves. So g5 might be an option, since I checked bishop d3, but bishop d3 then just knight takes d3. So g5, yeah, if like briefly talking about g5, I'm not sure if I'm in time to do that because of knight b5. I mean, knight b5 looks a bit annoying. And that's why maybe, for example, maybe the move is a6 or c6. But yeah, let's go forward. So if we talk about forcing moves, then the only one that at least makes sense is g5. So we write it down and keep it in mind. Next step, pieces improvement. Pieces improvement. So bishop on f8 should be developed at some point, and bishop c5 comes to mind, but unfortunately there is queen b5 check, and black loses the bishop. Otherwise, bishop c5 makes perfect sense, developing the bishop, trading some pieces, not bad at all. Developing it to other square, for example, bishop b4 or bishop d6, I don't think it makes sense, since like bishop b4, white plays knight b5. Bishop d6, similarly knight b5. And if we talk about white's ideas, white threats, which is I mentioned knight b5. Maybe it's also like can be knight a4, but knight a4 is slow anyway. Like an idea, but slow. Knight b5 is more like looks more annoying. So yeah, pieces improvement, development. Bishop c5 doesn't work. Bishop b4 I don't really like because of knight b5. I mean, it's possible, but knight b5 not really something I want white to play. So for example, if I had to answer right now, I would say yeah, not a move I would really like to play, but something weird like a6. But then white plays queen c4. Queen c4 is actually not threatening much, but it is a move. Yes, it is a move. Maybe playing g5 anyway and saying like I don't care. So for instance, g5, and if knight b5, then g takes f4, rook takes c7, queen takes c7, g takes f4, rook takes c7, queen takes c7, knight takes c7, f takes e3, queen takes e3, and for example, I'm not sure if I can take the knight on c7. Maybe I can just do something like rook d3, but at the very least I have rook and two pieces, and if I take the knight on c7, king c7, I'm not sure if my king, probably the king will escape, so then it will be three pieces. So I don't really want, you know, a6, yes, it's about preventing knight b5, but then, for example, queen c4, then it will be like maybe some other stuff like knight a4. So maybe let's go for something more interesting and let's play g5. The point is to kick away the knight from f4, and if knight moves away, then there will be bishop d3. So my move, not sure, but g5. In this position, like white's queen on a3 looks a bit weird. It should be placed somewhere on c2, for example, or d2. But queen on a3 has to defend the b3 pawn now. So let's start. Like, first of all, if white wants anything, not really. The position is more or less closed, so there is not much white can do. Bishop takes c5, at least like you should still check some captures, for example, some forcing moves. So bishop c5, but then bishop c5, of course, strategically speaking, it's a terrible move, giving up the bishop pair. So bishop c5, then either bc5 or dc5, and black is just perfectly fine. So yeah, there are no real threats by white. Okay, what about black's options? Here you should check if you have any checks, captures, and threats. There are no checks, captures like knight a4, knight b3, knight e4. They don't make any sense. Bishop a4, bishop e4. But still, you should like briefly, like spending 1 second or even less, check possible captures. So no captures. What about forcing, other forcing moves, like for example threats or attacking moves? Not really. Yeah, there is not much to attack. If we talk about piece improvement, then overall black's pieces are well placed. The rook from a8 can be improved, but actually, let's say if we play rook ac8, then like it's not that clear what the rook is doing on c8. Yes, it's probably it's better placed than on a8, but it is still the same. Yeah, I mean, it's not really a big improvement. But in your games, try to, like for example, if it was your game, if you're let's say 1500 player, then rook ac8 would be a good move. Especially if you don't have anything better. So let's check if we still like have something better. About other pieces, like maybe there is an idea of playing queen f6, queen b2, but after queen f6 there is bishop d4. So yes, other pieces, the knight on c5 is perfectly placed, the bishop on c6, rook on d8, bishop on g7. Yeah, there is no like really no point of improving them. It's not possible to improve them. And then our next step is pawn moves. So pawn moves, And there is, like, if we decide that our pieces are well placed, like for example in this position, of course with our rook on c8 from a8, it would be like, yeah, we can definitely say all our pieces well placed. It's not really possible to improve any of them. Here it's still possible to play rook ac8, but maybe it's not necessary, maybe it's already enough. So how about d5? D5 like might be interesting, since you see the queen on e7 is aligned against the bishop on e3 and bishop on e2. So for example, ed5, and there are some problems for white. What about other pawn moves? There is also f5. f5, by the way, this is Maratzi structure, so pawns on c4 and e4 versus the bishop on g7. So this is probably dragon Maratzi, yeah, I mean black played dragon, and white decided to go for e4 c4. Yes, I mean c4 move, Maratzi system. And f5 is a common idea. Oh, actually, that's interesting. Since like f5, like maybe not wouldn't be a great move. So, like for example, e takes f5, g takes f5. It's okay, like it's nothing wrong, but the game goes on. But actually, something what I already mentioned, the bishop on e3 and the bishop on e2. So if e takes f5, then there is e takes f5. And it's actually funny that white has no convenient way to defend the bishop on e3. I mean the bishop on e3 and bishop e2. So maybe f5 is even a better move than d5. Since after d5, also like after d5, there are some ideas for white. For example, d5, c takes d5, e takes d5, and then you see there is the rook on c1 aligned against the knight on c5 and bishop on c6. So maybe even bishop takes c5, bc5, queen c5. While after f5, the pawn on e4 is kind of hanging. If e takes f5, then e takes f5. Bishop takes c5, then we just take on c5, getting the bishop pair and perfect position. So yes, actually, yes, my move is f5.